the science community is ignoring a lot of the things that we're looking at, and so normal people are going out and doing experiments. And one of the experiments has turned up an amazing fact that we've not been told, and it destroys the whole idea of this heliocentric system, and that is the moon. Now, you can actually measure the temperature of the moonlight next to the temperature of the shade of the moonlight, and you'll find the moonlight is colder than the shade, the opposite from the sun. So the moon is throwing out its own light, and that light is the opposite from the sun. Now, that tells you that it's not reflecting the sun's light. It's producing its own, and its light is different from the sun's. So, you know, the scientific community have not told us this, because they won't tell us this, because it destroys this idea that the sun is, is lighting up the moon.
Everyone knows, like, if you're in sunlight, it's colder in the shade, right? So if it's 100 degrees in the sun, it's 90 degrees in the shade. You go to the moonlight, like especially in a full moon, especially if it's high in the sky, the moon is its own independent object. It is not reflecting the sun rays. The sun is its own object. Also, about the same size, which is, again, coincidentally, why the moon fits so perfectly in front of the sun during an eclipse. We always thought it was a coincidence that even though it was 400 times farther away, that it was also exactly 400 times less diameter, which is why it fits. And the other weird thing about the moon, which everyone thinks, oh, it's just a coincidence, is that we never see the other side of it. It's constantly perfectly rotating, so we only see one side of the moon. Exactly one side. It's not like we have like a quarter of a degree every 5 years or half a degree here and there. It's always the same side. There are no coincidences when it comes to this system. It was deliberately built, but I think it was deliberately built to be detected. And I think we were naturally supposed to figure this thing out maybe as late as the 1970s, but the government figured it out first, and they have been spending a heck of a lot of money trying to keep it a secret.
The sun's light is indeed warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, while the moon's light is indeed cold, silver, damp, putrefying, and septic. A thermometer placed in the sun's light will always read warmer than a thermometer placed in the sun's shade, while a thermometer placed in the moon's light will always read cooler than a thermometer placed in the moonshade. Plant and animal substances exposed to sunlight quickly dry, shrink, coagulate, and lose their tendency to decompose and putrefy, whereas plant and animal substances exposed to moonlight will quickly show symptoms of putrefaction and decay. A French scientist named Léon Foucault performed a similar experiment to Cavendish, but this time hanging a single ball from the ceiling, swinging it, and claiming all lateral motion observed to be proof that the Earth was turning beneath the pendulum. Since Foucault's original demonstration, these pendulums have regularly been swinging at museums and exhibition halls worldwide, purporting to provide everlasting perpetual proof of the heliocentric spinning ball Earth theory. The truth is, however, unbeknownst to most of the duped public, that Foucault's pendulum is a failed experiment which proves nothing but how easy it is for pseudoscience to deceive the malleable masses. To begin with, Foucault's pendulums do not uniformly swing in any one direction. Sometimes they rotate clockwise, and sometimes counterclockwise. Sometimes they fail to rotate, and sometimes they rotate far too much. Just like the Cavendish experiment, scientists who have attempted to replicate Foucault's findings have conceded time and again that, quote, it was difficult to avoid giving the pendulum some slight lateral bias at starting. In truth, the behavior of the pendulum actually depends on 1. The initial force beginning its swing, and 2. The ball and socket joint used, which most readily facilitates circular motion over any other. The supposed rotation of the Earth is completely inconsequential and irrelevant to the pendulum's swing. If the alleged constant rotation of the Earth affected pendulums in any way, then there should be no need to manually start pendulums in motion. If the Earth's diurnal rotation caused the 360-degree uniform diurnal rotation of pendulums, then there should not exist a stationary pendulum anywhere on Earth. Also in the mid-19th century, another Frenchman named Gaspard Gustave Coriolis performed several experiments showing the effect of kinetic energy on rotating systems, which have ever since become mythologized as proof of the heliocentric theory. His Coriolis effect is often said to cause sinks and toilet bowls in the northern hemisphere to drain spinning in one direction, while in the southern hemisphere causing them to spin the opposite way, thus providing proof of the spinning ball Earth. Once again, however, just like Foucault's swinging pendulums and Cavendish's hanging balls, sinks and toilets in northern and southern hemispheres do not consistently spin in any one direction. Sinks and toilets in the very same household are often found to spin opposite directions, depending entirely upon the shape of the basin and the angle of the water's entry, not the supposed rotation of the Earth. The Coriolis effect is also said to affect bullet trajectories and weather patterns as well, supposedly causing most storms in the northern hemisphere to rotate counterclockwise, and most storms in the southern hemisphere to rotate clockwise, to cause bullets from long-range guns to tend towards the right of the target in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. Again, however, the same problems remain. Not every bullet and not every storm consistently displays the behavior, and therefore cannot reasonably be used as proof of anything.
Now, real quick, let's kind of just explain the Coriolis effect in layman's terms. The Coriolis effect is the effect that when the bullet leaves the barrel of the gun, it is actually leaving the surface of the Earth. So as the bullet leaves the barrel of the gun, the Earth is still rotating, and the bullet is not rotating with the Earth. So the Earth will actually rotate out from underneath of the bullet while it is in flight.
There's the pretty blue marble that NASA claims we are living on, with circumference of 24,901 and 3959 radius. So to find the curvature, you take 8 inches times your distance squared. That's 8 inches times your distance squared, and if you don't square the distance, you end up with this, and this is not what NASA has shown us. They have given us a beautiful blue marble that we love. So you get 8 inches for 1 mile, 32 inches in 2 miles, 16.6 feet with 5 miles, so on and so forth. So what I did is I shot this pier, which is in Daytona Beach, Florida, and as you can see, between the water and the walkway of the pier is about 12 to 16 feet based on the height of the people and the railing. So I started at Granada, which is 4.92 miles away, and I shot this, and based on that distance and the formula, there should be 16 feet of curvature, but obviously you can still see the entire gap under the walkway there between that and the water. So in addition to that, behind that pier is actually a lighthouse, which you can see right above the pier. You can see the light. That is 16 miles away from my location, and I shot that lighthouse. Now that lighthouse is 175 feet tall, and the curvature from 16 miles away should be 170 feet. You can clearly see about the entire lighthouse beyond that pier. So like I said, there should be 170 feet of curvature, but there's none. And those hotels there are even further. Those are in New Smyrna, which is 20 miles. If NASA is right and there is, we do live on a ball, they're going to have to make up that curvature. If it's not in the 20 miles I'm shooting, well then that means it's got to be made up further on down the line. So You can't have it both ways. You can't say we live on this ball and then say, oh, you can't detect the curvature. Well, you got to detect it somewhere, because if it's not dropping here, it's going to have to drop even more down the lines in order to make that circle, that ball they say we live on. And it's pretty round. That blue marble they give us is perfectly round.
Lighthouses are one great example. The Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England, it's 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. Why can you still see it? Another one worth mentioning that people be familiar with is the Statue of Liberty. It stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. Now, if the Earth was a globe at the dimensions that they give us, that would put Lady Liberty at an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon.
until I found this photo from Grand Mere State Park. This is from Joshua Nowicki, and what you're seeing here is a mirage. We typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake that we're actually seeing a mirage of the Chicago skyline. Very interesting here. Here's what's happening. This is a good example of a superior mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon. Should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image of that skyline back towards the viewer. And so typically we would not be able to see this. This image would be viewable from much, much higher in the sky, up in space. But instead, we're able to see it on the Lake Michigan shore. Very fascinating, and that's the same reason we're actually seeing this ring on the radar tonight as well. Because of the inversion, we call it atmospheric ducting, it's bending the radar rays back towards the ground. So even on a clear night, we have some interesting weather.
Hey everyone, Paul back with another video today. This one should be pretty quick. Just wanted to throw this out there in case you have not seen some of these pictures that have been shared around online. Globelings are sharing this in mass, some of these links to a set of photos taken at Lake Pontchartrain down in Louisiana near New Orleans, showing what appears to be the power lines going over a curve at the end of the photo there. So a lot of memes have been developed, as you can see. So I've got a copy in front of you here, and being thrown around online as proof, finally proof of water curving around a ball. So now this is proof that we live on a spinning ball hurtling through space. Well, so I saw these photos, and it reminded me of a video I saw posted a couple months ago, taken I think from about the same area. So I'm going to play that video right now. What I want you to do when you're watching the video is to think about this image that you have in front of you now, with the power lines curving over the edge there, as you can see, almost like going off a cliff. See, it's kind of flat and then kind of drops off to the edge. So compare that with this video.
All right, Flat Earthers, this is the shot I've been trying to get. I am dangerously on 55 and I-10 junction in New Orleans over Lake Pontchartrain. These are the utility poles that run 18 miles across the lake. And I just wanted to show you the shore on the other side. They do not dip down. 60 feet. They are perfectly level.
So before we go and finish off this video, I just want to kind of compare and contrast these two photos. So as you can see from the video, we've got some very straight converging lines here. The bottom of the power lines and the top of the power lines are converging into a single point, which for those of you that have done your research, you know that that's how our eyes work. That there's a vanishing point due to the limits of our vision. And this is very consistent. I don't know about you guys, but this is very consistent with what I see in real life. So if we go back to the picture, it looks quite different.
Question things, and I thought it was completely insane, this whole flat earth thing. This is just absolutely insane. Then I started watching the videos, and so finally I've got a buddy, one of my best friends. He's a pilot full-time, and I was discussing with him. He's laughing, talking about, you know, how retarded and moronic, those are his words, not mine, that these people were. And I just am trying to keep an open mind here. But I asked him if he would snap a picture at 30,000+ feet of the horizon, because I had seen in other videos on YouTube they had mentioned that pilots a lot of times bring preconceived ideas that they see the curve of the Earth. So he sent me an iPhone picture back from the cockpit of his airplane he was flying, and he said, "Look, the Earth is round. End of story!" Exclamation marks. You know, screw these morons and all this crap. And I decided to upload it into GIMP, and I found this pretty interesting here. Let's look. So I loaded the image out of the windshield of the plane there. Let's go to Tools. You know, if you look down here, it's kind of blurry. You can't really see the horizon too well. But if you go to Tools and you go to Color Tools, let's go to Brightness Contrast. Let's pull it over the contrast all the way to 127. Now you will get a clear picture of the horizon here, where the white line is. Then it goes to light blue and dark blue. Well, let's go back to Tools. Let's draw a straight line across that here. And you'll see what I see. Or maybe you will. Let's put a straight line, try to line it up pretty close here. And it looks pretty good to me. Okay, do you guys see any curvature in the horizon? This is the one that my pilot buddy who flies for a living sent me as proof of a curved Earth. I don't know, it looks pretty flat to me, so I will continue my journey on this whole debate, but I'm starting to question things that I never thought I would question.
I was an airline pilot for Delta for 26 years. A pilot's primary flight instrument is his artificial horizon, which he has to be maintained level to keep from climbing and descending. From a cockpit, weather permitting, I could see hundreds of miles in all directions, viewing cities connected by roads across the flat plain as far as the eye could see. Nothing ever leaned.
If a pilot is flying around the curve of the Earth, then he should be dipping the nose down, and every 5 minutes he should be dipping the nose down to stay around the curve. That's absolute proof that a plane flies over a flat surface rather than a curved one. But I went to the manufacturer of the artificial horizon, and they confirmed to me that it's completely mechanical, nothing electronic in it whatsoever. So it's literally just a gyroscope that can freely move. That right there is proof to me that planes fly over a plane.
all the colors.
Law of perspective dictates that the angle and height at which an object is seen diminishes the farther one recedes from the object, until at a certain point the line of sight and the seemingly uprising surface of the earth converges to a vanishing point, i.e. the horizon line, beyond which the object is invisible. Thomas Winship wrote, "If we select a flat street a mile long containing a row of lamps, it will be noticed that from where we stand the lamps gradually decline to the ground, the last one being apparently quite on the ground. Take the lamp at the end of the street, and walk away from it 100 yards, and it will appear to be much nearer to the ground than it was when we were close to it. Keep on walking away from it, and it will appear to be gradually depressed until it is last seen on the ground and then disappears." Now, according to the astronomers, the whole mile was only depressed about 8 inches from one end to the other, so that this 8 inches could not account for the enormous depression of the light as we recede from it. This proves that the depression of the pole star can and does take place in relation to a flat surface, simply because we increase our distance from it, the same as from the street lamp. In other words, the farther away we get from any object above us, as a star for example, the more it is depressed. And if we go far enough, it will sink, or appear to sink, to the horizon and then disappear. The writer has tried the street lamp many times with the same result. Firstly, Aristotle noted that when sailing away from an observer on shore, ships approaching the horizon disappeared from view hull before masthead, and he postulated that this occurrence was due to the curvature of the earth. Aristotle argued that the hull disappeared first because beyond the horizon the globe earth curved downwards, causing the hull and eventually the masthead and entire ship to drop below the curvature. Today, we can easily prove that Aristotle was incorrect in his assumption by using telescopes, binoculars, and zoom cameras. Once a ship has completely disappeared beyond the horizon, modern technology allows us to zoom in and bring the entire vessel, hull and all, back into full view. This proves that ships do not disappear hull first due to the alleged curvature of the Earth, and that the horizon line is in fact merely the vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view, and not, as Aristotle supposed, the beginning of the Earth's curvature. The horizon is subjective, and varies in distance depending on the weather, the observer's height, and the strength of his eyesight or instruments. As noted previously, the horizon actually rises to the eye of the observer no matter how high he climbs, which also proves that the horizon line is not some objective point of curvature on a convex Earth, but rather the subjective vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view. Just as the ancients espoused, the Earth is observably motionless to all our senses, and the horizon remains perfectly flat as far as the eye can see. Not only does the horizon remain perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer, but whether at sea level, the top of Mount Everest, 35,000 feet high in an airplane, or even at over 100,000 feet high, the highest any amateur hot air balloon has ever flown, the flat horizon actually rises to the eye level of the observer all the way up. On a globular Earth, no matter how large it is assumed to be, the horizon would remain where it was, and the rising observer would have to tilt his head downwards further and further the higher they rose to see the steadily falling horizon. Many people will be shocked to know that to this day, every single scientific experiment ever devised to show the alleged motion of the Earth has failed to do so.
Okay, let's just imagine our world as a beach ball. All right, the lines of the ball clearly point out what so many in the ball Earth camp are blatantly ignoring. A ball, by its very nature, demands that its surface immediately begins to curve downward and away from any point on it. So if we imagine Poser James here, I'm using a software called Poser, let's call him PJ for short. If we imagine him standing on the beach ball, the problem becomes immediately apparent. Okay, he's standing on a ball. Immediately the ball is curving downward and away from his feet in all directions. That's what a ball does. And it doesn't matter how big the person is, nor does it matter how big the ball is. But let's go ahead and shrink PJ and enlarge the ball for the sake of example here. Now, notice the lines are still curving downward and away in all directions, even though he's getting smaller and the ball is getting bigger. This never changes with scale. Okay, now let's zoom into tiny PJ on the massive ball here and consider the curvature word problem that was brought up by this individual serving in Iraq. If PJ was 6 feet tall and he had a clone, who was also 6 feet tall, right, who walked 1 mile away from him, the ground his clone would be standing on would be 8 inches lower than the ground that he was standing on, right? Again, the curvature math is 8 inches per mile squared. So the first mile, 1 times 1 is 1 times 8 is 8 inches. So the ground from point A to point B is going to be 8 inches below point A. All right, you with me so far? Now, if the clone had a clone who walked another mile away, that clone's ground would be 32 inches below PJ's ground. Why? Because it's 8 inches per mile squared. 2 miles, okay, 2 times 2 is 4 times 8 is 32. So the ground that clone number 2 is standing on is 32, almost 3 feet below the ground that PJ is standing on. And if we had yet another clone who was to walk 1 more mile, his ground would be 72 inches or 6 feet below PJ's. Thus, the top of clone number 3's head would be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. I know for some of you the gerbil just jumped off the wheel, so let's look at it again. This time we'll check it out from a different angle. Again, PJ's clone walks 1 mile away. The top of his head would be 8 inches lower than PJ's. Another clone walks an additional mile, and the top of his head is then 32 inches below PJ's. The third clone walks 1 more mile, and at just 3 miles away from PJ, the ground clone number 3 is standing on is 6 feet below PJ's. Thus, the top of clone number 3's head is going to be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. Now, I'm not trying to see whether or not the person can see the other person. What I'm trying to show you is the issue of the ground level. The ground level is the issue that I'm focused on with this example. Because if clone number 3's ground is 72 inches below the ground that PJ is standing on, it's going to be physically impossible for PJ to look straight ahead or to the left or the right or behind him and ever expect to see the horizon at his eye level. It cannot be done. I'm going to say it again. If you're just looking straight ahead, there is no way the horizon could ever be at your eye level. When the ground you're standing on is immediately beginning to recede away from you in every direction, you're standing on a point on a ball, supposedly. The ground you're standing on immediately begins to recede away in every direction 8 inches per mile squared. Now, I understand we're not on a perfect beach ball, but you actually compound the problem if you start using the argument, well, there are, peaks and valleys and hills and mountains and plateaus and canyons and blah, blah, blah. All you're doing is pushing the problem further out, and eventually you, the ball earther who uses this argument, are the one who's in danger of falling off the edge of something, because you can extend that out only so far, and then you're going to have to correct the terrain back to that 8 inches per mile squared so that you can have your 25,000 mile circumference ball. Or pair if you choose to go by Neil deGrasse Tyson. But for this math to be true, and it has to be in order to maintain a 25,000 mile circumference, no person could ever look straight ahead and expect to see the horizon at his eye level. This whole idea of the eye level horizon being equal, as depicted here, or as depicted when you slice off a piece of an orange, is a myth. Alright, let's continue.
There's a handy website that will calculate the distance to the horizon for any viewing height, and it also tells you how much of an object will be hidden behind the horizon if it's past the horizon. The site is metabunk.org/curve.
So I went there, and this is the calculator that's there, and you can run all the same calculations that I showed you in the other websites. It works very much the same way. But this is what's interesting to me. Let's look at this graphic right here on the bottom. See, they always got this thing in the middle between the observer and the target, and it's called the bulge. And they'll have you believe that everything you're looking at is on the other side of a big hump, a big bulge. You're always going to have to walk uphill first and then walk downhill to get to wherever you're going. In all of these examples, it's always this way. Okay, they got this target, over here, and the observer over here, and this big bulge in the middle. And that's what all these ballers would have you believe, is that everything you're looking at is on the other side of a big bulge. You're going to have to walk or drive or swim or take a boat or fly over to get to. And somebody else has done videos on how big that bulge would be if you're flying from Los Angeles to Hawaii. I mean, it gets quite absurd when you start putting it into these terms. But let me just simplify all of this for you and bring PJ back into the picture. Now, he's standing on top of the ball, right? But I'm going to slide him over to the observation point here. Now, I'm keeping him perpendicular to the ground. Now, do you see the problem? The only way he could be looking toward the top of the bulge is if he's tilting his head down. He'd have to be looking down. He couldn't be standing straight up, looking straight out. The only way he's going to see the curve is if he's looking down. Let's keep PJ looking straight ahead, and I'm going to slide him down so that his eyeball essentially ends up on the ground, looking straight out. And you're going to see the problem here. Look, at ground level, if his eyeball is on the ground and he's looking straight out, the ground is beginning to immediately curve downward. There's no bulge. There's no bulge. Balls, it don't work that way. If you're standing perpendicular on top of it, and then you point on the ball. But yet every single curvature chart you're going to find is going to show this same kind of nonsense, where they either have the observer or the target at ridiculous angles, or they're forcing the observer to look downward, such as in this example. But there's also plenty of others that depict essentially the same thing. In fact, if you go back to the Channel 57 ABC news report, Skyline Skepticism, the Lake Michigan Mirage, you remember the weatherman said,
Now we have a lot of web extras with this story. Log on to abc57.com after this newscast. You can see the time lapse, a short lecture by Dr. Rennie, and how you can calculate how far you can see to the horizon based on your location. Reporting live, I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Coombs.
So let's check that out. Here on the website, scroll down, and he's got this link right here. How far away is the horizon? If you click on that, it takes you to this page right here. From Discover magazine, I guess. How far away is the horizon from bad astronomy? That's properly labeled, I think. Bad astronomy. It could also be bad geometry. So they've got this picture right here, to help you figure out the Earth's curvature. You got your little man here, in this case standing perpendicular to the ground, but he's looking down. He's not looking straight out. He's looking down. They always depict it that way. In fact, if we go to this other one here, Earth Curve Calculator, a lot of people like to use this one. This is the way it looks today. But I'm going to tell you that's not the way it has always looked. They've got the H0 or the observer here and the target perpendicular with the ground. But this is a recent change to the website. This is the way they used to depict it. They used to have H0 and H1 straight up and down, instead of perpendicular with the green line representing the globe. Here's a meme I created back on January 16th, and I posted it on Facebook. You see the problem here? Look at this graphic. Look at the way they have H0 and H1. See the angles? See the problem? That would mean that the person on H1 and the target are leaning inward, which means they're not standing perpendicular to the ground. They're leaning inward. I posted this meme on Facebook, and as I was making this video and getting ready to use this example right here, guess what? Okay, I posted this January 16th, and here it is February 2nd, and I go to this website and it's changed. So just to prove that they did this, somebody must have showed them the meme or saw something that either myself or somebody else was pointing out to mock this graphic. So they changed it. And here's the proof. You go back to the Wayback Machine, go back to October of last year, and what do you know? There's the original one that was just a few months ago that they changed, because they know that we're on to their game here. They know that what they're putting out is crap, but at least they're consistent. They're doing the same thing everybody else is doing. So let's go back to this other one from Metabunk. Now I'm going to enlarge this graphic and orient it so that PJ is standing straight up and down again, and lower him so that he's within the observer square. Now this is what they're saying. This is the observer looking toward the horizon. But unlike their example here, where they're forcing the observer to look downward toward the horizon, my observer is in their little square looking straight out. And from the feet of my observer, the ground is curving downward, just like it would do in real life if we're standing on a ball.
Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson was just on the Anthony Cumia show saying how at the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai, if you go to the top of it, the sun sets 2 minutes later than at the bottom, and that proves that the Earth is a ball. So what they're saying is they're saying that the Earth is a ball, and the curved shape of the horizon is what's the sun is disappearing beyond that. And if you go up in the tower, you'll see the sun again for 2 more minutes and watch it set again. And that's proof that it's setting beyond a ball. Yet, if you go up there and you take video 360 degrees around you, you'll see the horizon's perfectly flat all the way around you, perfectly at eye level, and it rose with you at eye level right from the base of that tower to the top of that tower, as is only possible on a flat plane. A ball, no matter how big the ball is, the horizon would stay where it is, and you'd have to tilt your head looking down more and more as you rose to see it. And of course, it would also curve. The reason that you see the sunset slightly later from a higher position is simply perspective on flat surfaces. If you rise even higher than that, then you'll see even farther as well. They don't seem to mention that. When you go higher in altitude, you're able to see further along a flat plane. And that's all that's happening as you go higher. So the sun, when it's setting, is actually maintaining its altitude at about 3,000 miles above us, and it circles over and around the flat Earth. And so from your position, due to perspective, as it goes away from you, just like a row of street lamps as they're going away from you, the one closest to you seems very high overhead and then slowly dips down more and more to the horizon, or just like a long, narrow hallway where the floor rises up, the ceiling comes down, and the two walls come into a point right in the middle.